Hello everybody, how's it going? I'm the Tmeister and welcome back to Timbukton in episode 54 of the series. And guys, I gotta tell you, sit back and relax, grab some popcorn or whatever, and enjoy this episode as it's going to be the last episode featured on Timbukton Airport. Well, I shouldn't say that because next episode is going to be a sort of cinematic only episode featuring everything that we built, but this is the last episode that we will be working on the actual airport itself. And it's going to be quite a longer episode too. It's about half an hour long, a little longer than what we're used to in the Timbukton series. So sit back and relax, guys, and enjoy this episode. So this episode is going to be, like I said, pretty packed. We're going to be working a lot on detailing the airport. Now, I could have probably divided this episode into two. I could have created two separate episodes with the amount of work that is done in this video. But, you know, I figured pretty much what's left to do is all detail work. I thought, you know, might as well just get it done. And then we can move on to some other things. So, yeah, this episode is going to be pretty much only focused on detailing. So, as you can see me do right now, I am preparing the runways of the airport. And this in itself is quite an extensive project. Of course, both runways are very long, and runways are, I want to say, complex in a sort of way. Like, there's a lot of specific markings that go in specific places. Obviously, I'm not going to create an actual, like, 100% accurate runway to, you know, what it would be in real life. But I am going to get it as close as I can. You know, I've said it before, like, I am quite knowledgeable when it comes to aviation stuff, but I'm quite clueless when it comes to, like, specific runway markings and what distance from each other that they should be and all those kind of things. I'm not even sure, like, if you become a pilot, you really know that kind of stuff. I don't know, maybe you do. But anyways, we're going to be doing some runway stuff for the next little while. After that, we'll get into detailing the taxiways and terminal areas. And finally, we'll be doing just some general detailing around the airport, such as like trees and bushes and whatever. So a lot of that kind of stuff going on. Yeah, unfortunately, what's happening right here, guys, is when I started this entire airport project, I flattened the terrain as good as I could get it. I mean, it's pretty easy to flatten terrain in City Skylines, but I might have missed a little chunk, or I don't know what happened. Somewhere in the middle of the runway, there's like a little bump. The runway elevation is a little higher in the middle than it is on each end for whatever reason, and it just makes it a huge pain when dealing with decals and ploppable asphalt, which is not very terrain friendly. But anyways, whatever. It made it quite interesting, and in the end, I made it all work, so it wasn't too bad. So these lines here represent the touchdown zones. So when a plane comes into land, pilots will typically aim for these lines here. And I'll be completely honest, I'm not sure like what these smaller lines down, a little further down the runway are. So initially I had these runway markings, but I found that they were quite small, and with a little searching around, I found these bigger numbers, and you know, they're just perfect for this kind of thing. So here we have runway 26 and 10, 26 and 10. And why those numbers, you may ask? So I explained this in the very first airport related episode I've ever done in City Skylines. I think it was like episode 5 or 6 maybe of the series, where we built a tiny little, not even regional, like what would be smaller than regional? Like a little private plane airport somewhere around Aberdeen. But I explained that runway markings are taken from the compass radial, and depending on which degree that compass the runway is heading, that's the number that's stamped onto it. Divided by 10, of course. So if you're at 240 degrees on the compass radial, then your runway would be 24. So in this case here, we're 260 degrees. So of course, runway 26. And the opposite of 26 would be 10. So how I figured out these runway headings was actually quite simple. I just took my camera and I panned exactly north, or as close to north as I could possibly get it, and I put my field of view directly on top of the airport. And on my second monitor, I pulled up a compass and I just sort of eyeballed it and tried to figure out which runway headings I should use for both runways. So really not that complicated. It only took a couple of minutes. But yeah, the runways are pretty much done as far as like the actual runway goes. Now the next step will be to detail the taxiways, and thankfully there's not a whole lot of detailing to do for that. Really the only thing that there is to do is to plop down the taxiway lines. So the vanilla taxiways do come with their own lines, but I find they're quite pale and kind of boring, and they don't intersect properly. So when you merge two taxiways together, the lines should sort of follow where the airplane's wheels would go. There should be like these curved lines going to every point in the intersection. But of course in the vanilla game, they don't do that. There's just kind of like this random blank space. So I just overlaid all of the taxiways with Vasimers. Is it Vasimer? I'm not even sure how to say his name properly, but anyways, he makes some really great aviation-related assets. Pretty much everything that you see in this airport is his. All the gates and all the signs, the lights, everything that you're going to see is made by him. So moving on now, what I'm doing right now is I'm placing down what are called stop bars. Stop bars are placed at every intersecting taxiway, and they're sort of the equivalent of a stop sign. So if you're taxiing down the runway and the control tower tells you, hold short of taxiway Bravo, well, as soon as you would come up on taxiway Bravo, you would stop at the bar and await further instructions. Those stop bars are at every intersection along the runway as well. So obviously you want to make sure that there is no traffic on the runway when you're about to cross it. So you would stop at this bar here and await instructions from the tower telling you to cross the runway. So there's a lot of like rules and regulations when it comes to taxiing and all different sort of signs. So I'm going to try to get this as realistic as possible. And what I'm doing right now in regards to like the signs and lines and all that is based on my experience with Flight Simulator. So when I was a little younger, I used to live on that game. Like I spent probably thousands of hours in Flight Sim. Time well spent, honestly. And 2, personal experience. So, flying around with my father, you sort of see these kind of things firsthand, especially being in a tiny little Piper Cherokee. Like you're really low to the ground, and it's really important to follow these signs. So I may have missed a lot of subtle details that would be in an airport this size, but I tried to get it as close as possible. Now what I'm doing right now, these little markings right here, they just represent which runway you're about to enter or you're about to cross. I've never actually encountered these in real life, probably just because I'm really close to a smaller international airport. But based on what I've seen on Google Maps, a lot of American airports have these types of things. And I think American airports in general just have a lot more markings and a lot more signs than even like the biggest Canadian airports. I don't know if it's like rules and regulations that are different between the two countries, but I don't know. It's just subtle details like that I've noticed. But at this point, pretty much all the taxiway markings are done. Now what we'll have to do is getting to the taxiway signs. Now every taxiway in an airport is automatically assigned a letter, and it usually starts with Alpha and it works its way down to however many taxiways there are. I think in Timbukton we only have like 5 or 6, maybe not even. I think 5. So this main taxiway here that follows 2, 6, and 1, 0, that's taxiway Alpha. And normally taxiway Alpha would be like your main taxiway in these sort of airports. So I'm just following that same sort of structure. But these little signs here, they just help you determine where you are, what runway or what taxiway you're crossing. And these are the signs that you would follow when taxiing to your gate. So as soon as a plane would land, you would get commands from the control tower to hop onto taxiway Delta, for example. So you would follow the signs, turn on to Delta, and the tower would give you further instructions on how to get to your parking spot. So these are basically road signs for airports. And this is actually the most tedious thing I've probably ever done in the game. There was just so many little details and little signs. And as you can see in my prop menu here, I mean, there are just tons of different signs and things. Yeah. And I mean, even just like deciphering where everything is in the airport, like I pretty much had to sketch up a little drawing of the airport and decide which taxiway was going to be which. So it was quite tedious, and just the signs themselves took me like a whole evening. But it was all right, time well spent. I actually enjoyed doing this. So as you can see right now, I'm no longer dealing with yellow signs. And you probably already guessed, these red signs represent runway markings. So they just indicate onto what runway you're crossing or what runway you're embarking on. By the end of this episode, guys, you'll have a pretty good idea on how airports work. But don't take my word for it. Take this with a grain of salt, because I like nothing about this is 100% confirmed. Like I said, I'm just basing this entire thing on visual aspects, like what I've seen, what I've experienced so far. So don't go out and tell all your friends this is exactly how an airport works, because I probably got a ton of things wrong. So at this point in my progress, I think I'm done with all the signs, and I'm moving on to the gates. Now the gates were pretty much all detailed before in one of the first airport episodes, but I felt like the ground could use a little bit more detail work. And just judging by how a lot of other creators that I've seen building the airports, a lot of people went for these tiles here. And these tiles are actually from a doc pack that I downloaded a while ago. But I find that they just look super good in this type of setting. They look exactly like these huge cement concrete pads that you see in pretty much any airport. So I figured that I would just plop them down here and there. I didn't really want to take the time to plop them down everywhere in the airport. That would have just been too much, and whatever, I didn't think it was necessary. But I opted to just place them here and there at a couple of gates, just to have like that nice contrast and to make things look a little cooler. So I think I just placed some pads down at these 2 gates here and a few other spots. What this could represent too is not every airport would probably opt for these types of huge concrete slabs. I'm assuming a lot of airports would probably opt just for some good old pavement, but I don't know. I will, however, go heavy with the props later on, like tire markings and cracks, and I do end up placing a lot of concrete slab props. So, well, decals, I should say. Yeah, never mind what I just said there. I meant decals, but yeah. Okay, so now we're switching over to night mode, and we're going to start to light up the runways and taxiways, and just this step here creates so much life. It brings so much life into the airport. It's unbelievable. But this step right here that we're going to get into is quite tedious as well. There's a whole lighting scheme that runways use. Again, I'm not 100% sure on how everything is organized and how these sort of approach lights work, but I just based this completely on Google Maps. And a lot of what I'm referencing here is actually from Portland Airport, just because one of the reasons is Portland Airport right now is actually in 3D on Google Maps, and Halifax Airport is not. So I've sort of been cross-referencing both airports, but because of that 3D aspect in Portland, it just makes it so much easier because you can really zoom in and really get a sense of how everything is scaled and how everything should look. And I mean, the entire shape of this airport is really close to Portland Airport anyways. And I know these green lights sort of overpower everything, but I really wasn't able to find any other green light source that looked nice. But I don't know, I find it's not too bad. And especially once I end up plopping down all of the lights, there's some more red lights that are gonna go just beside these green lights here, and it sort of kills a little bit of that color. But I know, yeah, it's a little overpowered. If you guys don't know, that green strip of lights basically means the runway starts here. So just don't touch your wheels down on the runway before those green lights. And of course, on the other side of the green light, you have this huge strip of red lights. And as you guys probably guessed, that means that you're at the end of the runway. And if you can't stop your airplane before that bar of red lights, you're probably screwed, and you're gonna ruin a couple of $1 million worth of airplane and lighting systems. Now, I'm not sure if there's a way to animate these lights, but this last strip of single lights, those they're strobe lights. So they blink in a sequence going towards the runway. I haven't really figured out if there's any way to animate those, but that would just look really cool. It would add so much life to the airport, but it's no big deal. I mean, even just having the lights there statically, it's just really... It adds so much life to the airport as it is. But yeah, the runway lights are one thing. Afterwards, we're going to get into the taxiway lights, which are just as tedious, because that's just because every single surface of every taxiway is just dotted with lights everywhere. So every little curve and every stretch of taxiway, you always have these little blue lights on either extremity. So yeah, just to put this in perspective, the amount of work that went into this episode is quite amazing. I reckon I put maybe 15 to 20 hours in a week to bring you this episode. So at the beginning of last weekend, none of this was done. Like, I had no runway markings, no nothing. Everything was vanilla as you saw it in last week's episode. So basically for the last week, I've been finishing work, hopping on City Skylines immediately, and just hammering down some decals and props every night, all evening. So it's been a pretty extensive project, and I was just so committed on bringing this episode out to you guys, and I didn't want to drag this on for another 2-3 episodes. I was just like, nope, I'm finishing the airport this week, I'm putting in the hours, and away I went. But it's okay though, it was a lot of fun. I actually enjoyed this, like plopping down all the little lights and getting everything detailed, because it's all new stuff that I haven't dealt with ever in my City Skylines career. So it was all new, all fun. At this point, I'm pretty excited to get on with some new things in Timbukton, get the city growing again, adding on to like the suburbs and moving our way more out of the city. So the other day, I opened up a mod that's called the CSL mod. You guys are probably familiar with it. It's called the Show City Limits. And what that does is it displays the game's limit, because every sort of aspect of the game has a limit. So the game has a limit of how many Sims can be in your city at one time. There's a limit on how many vehicles can be on your roads at one time. So all of those little aspects have limits. And one of those limitations are the number of segments and nodes that you can place down in your city. So what you're seeing me do right now, like these blue circles, those are nodes, and the stretch of lights in this case are the segments. So I'll give you guys another example. When you're laying down roads in the game, so your roads are linked together with nodes, but the actual stretch of road are pieces, they're segments, all pieced together with the nodes. So the game has a limit of about 32,000 of these. I heard in various forums that it was 16,000, but for some reason my CSL mod is displaying 32,000, so I'm not sure if I have a mod or something installed that doubled the limit. I thought it was hard-coded all this time, but I don't know. Anyways, so right now my CSL mod is displaying a limit of 32,000, and right now we're at about 20,000 nodes and segments. So we're like 2/3 of the way to being completely filled up. So at this point, I'm kind of worrying that we won't be able to get everything in the city complete. I have so many plans and so many roads still to lay down, so I don't know, we'll have to see what we can do. There is a few methods that you can go about stretching that limit as far as it can go. One of those methods is to use the Move It tool to stretch your segments as long as you possibly can. So what I could have done in this case here, this long taxiway, or actually I can give you guys a better example, the runway. So Timbukton's runway, I just use the runway path mod or whatever. It lets you plop down runways wherever you want. So I just plopped it down, stretched the runway as long as it needed to be, but the runway is divided into probably a good 50 or so nodes and segments. Now to reduce the number of nodes and segments, I could have used the Move It tool and stretched the runway using one big segment. So that's one way we can go about it. At this point, with everything that's plopped down in the city, it'd be a painstaking task to go and to modify everything, especially with all the taxiways and runways being just littered with props. It would make it pretty much impossible. But that is one method that can be used. We still have a whole bunch of suburbs and stuff to do around Timbukton, and we still have 2 counties that we haven't really developed at all yet. So I'm kind of curious to how we're going to manage this. I might just have to call it quits at some point once we hit the limit, and that'll be that. But I don't know, I'm just going to keep going like I'm going. So we're almost at the end of this episode, guys, and I'm actually about to murder my prop count right now with these tire markings. I don't know, I just thought it would just add that next level of realism. There are no actual decals that you can place down to emulate these, so I don't know, I found these tire marks on the workshop at some point, and I just plopped down probably a couple of hundred of them just in this runway alone, and there are 4 other segments that I have to plop them down on, so I probably just added like 1,000 props to my prop count. No big deal. We'll eventually hit the prop limit at some point too. So yeah, no cinematics at the end of this episode. I felt like with all the work that we've put into this airport, I figured that episode 55 should be completely dedicated to the airport itself. So it's going to be completely cinematic. Not sure how long the episode's going to be, but it's going to showcase all of the different aspects of the airport, all the little nooks and crannies that you may have missed during the construction of the airport, so you'll get a chance to see all of that before we move on to the next thing in Timbukton. Not sure what that's going to be, but we'll see. But anyways, before the end of this episode, I just want to say that this project was super fun to work on. Ever since I started playing City Skylines and discovering that custom airports were a thing, I was set out to build my own custom airport at some point, and it's actually been years since I've been contemplating this. And finally Timbukton got to a point where an airport was necessary, and I thought perfect opportunity to build one, and a functional one at that too. So I have yet to test this actually. I've actually played the simulation a little bit just to see how the airport works, and I'm not sure if the fact that the airport is so far out of town, or I'm not really sure what, but the airport is really not busy at this point. I'll have to investigate a little further on why that is, but the airport is only getting like less than 10 passengers per week, maybe like 1 or 2 planes coming in every 5 minutes or so in real time. So I don't know, I wish it kind of was busier, but whatever, we'll see. But anyways, I'm super glad that it is functional. I'm not sure if there's a way that we can get the cargo terminal functional or not. I haven't really thought that out, but as long as passengers are coming in and out, that is more than what I can ask for. But yeah, guys, I really thank you for watching this episode. I really hope that the airport project has been fun for you guys to watch. First of all, I hope you found a little bit of inspiration out of it, and the feedback that I've been getting on the airport so far has been really great. I'm sure you guys are probably excited though to be moving on to some other things in Timbukton, but this airport's really been a pleasure to build, and yeah. So that is pretty much it for me, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Like I said, if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are not already. It really means a lot to me. And I'm going to say it again too, guys. I have a Patreon page set up now, so if you would like another means to support me, go ahead and check out my Patreon page. That would mean the world to me. But yeah, that is it for today. So until the next episode, guys, please take care.